Hi everyone. I recently had the question on what to do with the repeating section if it has non-mandatory data. So by that, the customer's asking, can we set the minimum number of rows to 0? So you actually can't do that. So I've got a repeating section here in my hazard report, and it's got some follow-up actions, and I'm saying minimum number of rows is 0. It's actually going to do is the minimum is 1, because if you have 0, it's like an empty group control. It just doesn't really make sense. So if I put a group here, it's just sitting there by itself. So we always have a minimum of 1. So you've got a couple of choices here. So let's say you could put a yes/no control in here. So you might say something like uh, follow up required, question mark, and then so you just say yes or no, and you put a rule in here, and you'll say something like hide. Actually, I didn't give the repeating section a good name, so let's just check follow up. Let's give that a good name. Follow up repeating section. And then we come back to rules and we go add, hide, follow up. And so we say if, what did I say? Follow up required is yes, then follow up, what was it called? Follow up repeating section. Visible is yes, else repeating section. Visible is no. So then we go ahead to here and we come to follow up actions. So there's no repeating section, and you tick the box and it actually shows. Now, what the customer is also asking is, well, what if I wanted to make these required? So if I make these required and make this required, is it still going to validate if it's hidden? So what actually happens is if you press next and press submit, it doesn't actually, so I can select something here and go next, 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 and submit. It's not actually validating that hidden section of controls. So this isn't validating until those controls are actually shown. So hiding them can get around that mandatory issue that you may have. So that's one way you could do it. But if you really didn't want someone to just tick an extra box so that they had to see something, which could be a bit annoying, you could do it a different way. So you come through to here and get rid of the required checkbox here, and let's get rid of our rule for a sec. Let's delete this one. So now if we come back to here, and we've got these mandatory fields here. Now, you could argue that we don't have any follow-up actions, and so when I come to next and press submit, and it's going to say, we'll select this one, press submit, it's asking me to put up follow-up actions. Now, what if I don't have any? And I don't want to tick the box to say, do I have any follow-up actions? It's superfluous to, it's just an extra tick box. So how do we get rid of this condition here? We want to make it fewer fields but easier to use. So what we do is we come through to here, and you might say turn that mandatory off. So required is no. And we're going to turn this one, required is no. So none of these are required. Now what we could do is come to rules. Actually what we might do is we go follow up and give these better names. So we go follow up and rating, follow up so we can find them, and follow up. Okay, so now I've got these three properties in here. So what you then want to do is come to rules, and you might say repeating section follow up. If follow up date time is filled, then description and rating required is yes and yes, else follow up description and rating required a no and no. So we're just going to give this a name. So set mandatory fields. Okay, go and create. So now when you come back to here and you're selecting your site where the hazard report is, you come through to here. Now nothing's mandatory, so I can skip over that and press submit. It hasn't validated. Now, if you come back to here though, and someone says, yes, I do have some follow-up actions, so I'm going to say, well, today I've got something to do and I'm busy and I forget to do that, press submit. It is actually going to ask me to go and put in my mandatory fields. So it's it's made it a little bit easier for that person. They didn't have to check a box to say, well, I have to put this stuff in. It's just that if they did want to put some follow-up actions, they've gone to the effort of, rather than the checkbox, they've started filling it out and said, well, if you're going to put a date and time, you got to give us a rating, you got to give us a description, or whatever else it might be. So that's a couple of ways you can get around that repeating section mandatory fields, and so you can either hide it and have a checkbox outside to show that, and then have the mandatory fields, or just have a field inside that once it's populated, you actually make all your other fields mandatory. So I hope that helps. Let me know in the comments. Cheers.